Our lesson starts with a banquet, but there are a lot of facts that occurred prior to this banquet that you must know about in order to understand the banquet. The King of Persia is holding a 6-month-long royal celebration. After removing Queen Vashti, the king has found Esther, a young Jewish woman raised by her cousin and stepfather Mordecai. At his instruction, Esther has kept her Jewish origin and her relationship with Mordecai a secret from the king. Now, Haman is a prince, well respected by the king. The king has commanded all the people in the realm to show respect to Haman by bowing to him. Mordecai has refused to bow to an evil man, which has silently angered Haman. Haman looked upon Mordecai as a typical Jew. He stereotyped them all. And his purpose was not only to do away with Mordecai, but to do away with every Jew in the kingdom. Haman tells the king that a certain group in the empire, that group was rebels. He offers money to proclaim a day when anyone in the kingdom could kill every person from that group they encounter and take their property. In essence, he was proposing Jewish genocide. When Mordecai learns of this, he tore off his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out in the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. Learning that Mordecai is in mourning greatly distresses Esther, so she tries to persuade her cousin and stepfather to stop mourning and sends him clothing. In the midst of a celebration, his actions were embarrassing the king, and this was potentially dangerous. Mordecai continues though. Esther needs to find out what's going on, so she sends a trusted friend, a servant, to Mordecai. Esther was comfortable in her palace. She was queen. She could have lived there and forgotten her crazy cousin, but she didn't. Mordecai tells Esther that she must talk to the king. Esther reminds Mordecai, her cousin, of her restrictions. To speak to the king would mean that she would break the law and potentially face the penalty of death. But Mordecai asserts, don't you think that you will survive and all the Jews will perish? God will provide for his people. And besides, you may have been put in place for this very time. Esther decides to help. To make her appeal to the king, Esther has to confess that she has deceived the king about her Jewish origins. To change this edict, Esther faces a foe that is one of the most politically powerful people in the land. She is going to have to attempt to convince the king to reverse an edict that he said was irreversible. When Esther declares, "If I die, I die," she is not just being dramatic. She is stating her determined resolve. And Haman arrive at Esther's banquet and begin to drink. Over their drinks, the subject of Esther's request is once again brought up by the king. The king is aware that something serious is troubling his queen, and he wants to assure her that he will grant her petition even before he knows what she's asked, even up to half of his kingdom. Esther then informs the king of things he should have known, but he had been deceived by Haman. She tells him that Haman's decree is speaking of Jews, and he has indeed condemned all the Jews to death. Esther now tells the king that she has been sold along with her people, not into slavery, but into death. And if it were merely slavery, she indicates she would silently accept her plight. She would not trouble the king with that matter. But she and her people have been sold for annihilation. The king is angry now. He is aroused and ready to rectify the situation. He wants to know who would do this to the queen. Eventually, Esther blurts out the name of Haman. Esther identifies Haman as an enemy as well as a wicked man. The king is shocked and angered. The king gets up from his wine drinking and walks out into the garden to think and to clear his head. Haman makes a futile effort to save himself. He attempts to plead with Esther for mercy. Drunk or clumsy, Haman falls upon Esther's couch where she is still reclining. At that very moment, while Haman is floundering on the queen's bed, the king returns in and sees him and is angry and assumes the worst, that Haman is now trying to sexually assault the queen. There is no hope for Haman after this. The king's servant covers Haman's face and are about to take him away, and Harbona, one of the king's servants, is aware of the gallows Haman has constructed to execute Mordecai. He mentions to the king that there is a gallows already ready at Haman's house. How fitting it seems that Haman's gallows would be used to put Haman to death, and so Haman is led away to be executed. Our prejudice beliefs sometimes end up destroying ourselves. Our plotting to eliminate issues, to do harm to others, and to act against people without brotherly love sometimes turn against ourselves. And our obligation to God and our fellow man sometimes causes us to put our self-interest aside and rise to the occasion. That's the lesson for this week. Have a great week. Bye.